Alright guys, today's notes we're going to be creating graphs from tables. Okay, so the table looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're going to be able to put points on a graph. Okay, so the first thing, this is our graph. Okay, there is 4 quadrants. This is quadrant 1, and it has positive. Your x is going to be positive and your y is going to be positive. This is quadrant 2. It consists of negative and positive numbers. This is quadrant 3. Negative and negative. And then this is quadrant 4. And it consists of positive and negative numbers. Okay, make sure if I'm writing, you're writing. So you're making sure you wrote all that. Okay. Another thing I want to talk about is the x and y axis. Okay, this right here is my x-axis. Okay, so when you label this graph, I'm going to label these sides x because this is my x-axis, and I'm going to label this y. Okay, another thing I want to show you is the origin. The origin is right in the middle here. Okay, the points for the origin is 0, 0. Okay, that's right in the middle. That's your origin. And one more thing I want to go into detail is the points on a graph. Okay. Usually you'll have points that look like this. When you have your table, let's say it's going to be 0, 1, 1, 3, 2, and 5. These are called my points. You read it first as x and y. X first and y. So when you plot these on the graph, you start with the x first. So this is my x-axis. So this is 0, 1. I'm going to start at this, right in the middle, my origin. And then it tells me that I'm going 0 on my x-axis. So that means I'm going to stay right here. But my y-axis, this line right here, it tells me I'm going to go 1. So I'm going to go up 1. So this is where your point is going to land. Okay, so that means that this is 0, 1. Remember, when you're reading this, you always have to start with your x. You're going from left to right, and then your y is going up and down. Okay, we'll do the next point. The next point is 1 and 3. So I'm going to start at my origin here. I'm going to go 1 over on my x-axis. This is positive 1, right? So we're going 1, and it tells me to go 3 on my y-axis. So that means I'm going to go up 3. So I'm going to follow it, and this is where my point is going to land, right here. Okay, so I just plotted that point. So this means it's going to be 1, 3. Okay, and we'll do the last one. The last one is 2 and 5. So I'm going to start with my x-axis first. Starting at the origin, it says to go to 2 and then go up to 5. So this is where my point is going to land. 2 and 5. Okay, so if I want to, I can connect it, and it's going up. I want you to write on the side here, if your graph is going up, that means it's positive. If it's going down, it's negative. Okay, make sure you have all that written. Okay, the next part we're going to learn about is my increments. So it says understanding a number line with plotting points. Example 1 says to fill in the missing value on each number line. So these number lines are just these axes, right? Just the numbers. Sometimes they won't have all the numbers filled in, so we're gonna have to fill them in. We do that by looking at my first increment here. We have 0, it doesn't have a number, then it goes to 20. So how you can solve that is by counting your jumps. So jump 1, 2. So that means I'm going to use that 20 and divide by the number of jumps. So it's going to be 20 divided by 2. Okay, so 20 divided by 2 is 10. So I just figured out what number it's skipping by. So 0, got to add 10 plus 10. 10 plus 10 is 20. 20 plus 10 is 30. And by now you can see what the pattern is. So it's going by tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and then 100, right? So if you can figure out that first jump, the first increment, usually there's a pattern. You just follow your pattern. Okay? Example 3. Oops, that's supposed to be a 2. So it says fill in the missing values. So this one's a little different. It goes from 0, it skips, it goes to 18, then 36, 54. So we're going to count our jumps. 1, 2. So that means I'm going to use this 18 and divide by 2. 18 divided by 2 is 9. So I just figured out the first increment. So it's going by nines. So 9, 18, 27, 36, and so forth, right? Okay, we got 45, 54, 63, oops. 63. Okay, so just make sure you have those filled in. Turn it over on the back, and I want you to do this increment. I want you to fill this one in. This is one that you are going to do. Okay, so remember, count your jumps, and then you're going to divide that by 50. However many times you jumped, you're going to divide it by 50. As soon as you get that first increment, you can see what the pattern is, what numbers it's going by. Okay, then you're going to fill in the rest. All right, pause the video so you can do that real quick. Okay, the next part, now we are going to be creating our graph. Okay, so I wrote down the steps. The first step you need to do is label your X and Y axis. So I'm gonna look at this graph right here. Okay, before I even read it, I'm already labeling my X axis and my Y axis. And I'm checking for these 3 things here. I'm checking for them. So if you don't have one, it's gonna be points off. Okay, the second step is to fill in missing increments. So just like we did up here, we got to figure out, because look, it's missing increments. Okay, so we're going to do our jumps. We got 1 jump, 2. That means I'm going to divide 40 by the number of jumps, which is 2. 40 divided by 2 is 20. So now I know what it's counting by. Going by 20. So 20, 40, 60, I want you to fill in the rest. 80, 100, 120, 140, 160, and 180. Okay, so we did step 1, we did step 2, and now we're going to do step 3. We got to plot our points. So the question says, during migration, a duck can travel 30 miles in 1 hour. Create a graph from the table. Okay, So this is my table. They already gave me my numbers. I just have to plot my points on this graph. So remember, you're starting with your X and then your Y. So each of these points here, so if I have 1, it's 1 and 30. 2 hours, he did 60 miles. 3 hours, he did 90 miles. 4 hours, he did 120 miles. And 5 hours, he did 150. So it's telling you hours is my X, and then the distance is my Y. Okay, so I am going to create points out of this graph. You always start with your X first and your Y. So my first X is 1 and 30. My second point is 2 and 60. My third point is 3 and 90. My fourth point is 4 and 120. And my fifth point is 5 and 150. Oops, I'm running out of space. Okay, so I'm going to put all these points on my graph. You need to be careful though. It's not always going to be pretty. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sometimes it could skip. Okay, so let's go ahead and plot my first point. I'm starting at my origin, 0. And I'm going to first go on my x-axis over 1. Then I'm going up to 30. Now, there's not a 30 here, but I know the number 30 is between 20 and 40. So I'm going to put that point right in the middle. Okay, I just did my first point. Now I'm going to do the second point. I'm starting with the origin. I'm going over on my x-axis 2 and up to 60, which is right here. Okay, went over 2, going up to 60. I'm going to check that off because I finished it. Now I'm going to do my third point. My third point, I'm starting at the origin. I'm going over to 3 and going up to 90. Again, there's not a 90 here, but I know the number 90 is between 80 and 100. So I'm going to put my point in the middle. Okay, checking that off. And then I'm going to do the next point. I'm going to do the point is starting at my origin. We're going over to 4 on my x-axis and going up to 120. And the last point is 5 and 150. I'm starting at the origin, going over 5 on my x-axis and up to 150. There's no 150, so I'm going to put it in between 140 and 160. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and connect my lines. So you can already tell that this graph, it's going up. It's a positive graph. Okay, so we did all 3 steps. We labeled my X and Y, put my labels, we filled in my missing increments here, and we plotted our points on the graph. Okay, so you're going to be doing this now. We'll go on to example 6 up here. No, we'll do example 3. Okay, it says Lydia is making necklaces. Every necklace needs 25 beads. Create a graph from the table. So again, we got our X. It tells you X and Y. Okay, remember my first step. My first step is to label your X and Y axis. So I'm going to look at this graph and I'm going to label. I know my X is here and my Y is up here. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit. The second step is to do my increments, fill in missing increments. So it missing some, so I'm going to count my jumps, 1, 2, and I'm going to divide that by 100. That's going to give me 50. So I know that it's counting by 50. So 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, 300, 350, 400, and 450. Okay, So now I'm going to plot my points. Okay, I gotta create my points. So this one, if I have one necklace, it's 25 beads. If I have 3, it's 75. If I have 6 necklaces, it's gonna be 150. And if I have 9 necklaces, it's 225 beads. So I'm gonna write my points now. So I'm gonna start with my X, then Y, 3, 75, 6, and 150, and then I run out of space, so I'm gonna do it right next to it, 9 and 225. Okay, if you notice, it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, right? So you need to be careful when you're plotting. You need to be careful. So I'm gonna start from my origin. It says 1 and 25, so I'm gonna start on my x-axis, go over 1 and up to 25. There's no 25 here, so I'm gonna have to know that it's between 0 and 50. So I'm gonna put my point right there. I'm gonna check it off. My next one is 3 and 75. So I'm gonna start at the origin, go over to 3, and go up to 75. Again, there's no 75, but I know 75 is between 50 and 100. Check it off. So 6 and 150, starting at the origin, going over to 6, and going up to 150. My point. And then there's 9 and 225, starting at the origin, going over to 9, and then seeing where that 225 is. I know it's between 200 and 250. So you see the difference between this graph and this one? There's kind of some skipping, but as long as you plotted your points correctly, it's fine. So this graph is going up, so we know it's a positive graph. Okay, so we did all 3 steps again. We labeled my x and y axis, we filled in my increments, and we plotted our points on the graph. So I want you to do this example 6 as your check-in. Okay, that's your check-in. So make sure you do those 3 steps. Your steps are right here. Label your x and y, fill in missing increments, and plot your points. On the practice paper that you have following these notes, that's what you're going to be practicing on. So be careful.